Hello, and welcome to part 3 of the Proteus project. Since last time, I've been working a lot on the interior details. I thought I'd take a little bit of a break from the exteriors and just work on the control panels and some of the interior details. The chart display thing, whatever you want to call that, is actually a little bit poor in the way it's done. There's basically just sort of molded depressions that they suggest to paint black. They don't give you any representation for the maps that stick out at all. They could have done something with the decal sheet where you could roll things up, or I don't know, just done something. So I drilled out the holes. I actually had a drill bit that was exactly the right size, so it was a pretty quick job to just drill those out. Anyway, so I got some paper, scribbled a few little bits of sort of red and black sort of lines on them to suggest potentially internal diagrams like you see. I basically cut up these little rolls, rolled them up, and then wrapped them around a toothpick to give them a bit of spring in the right size, and then popped them into each of these slots. I've left one empty because I will put the decal they give you, the decal they give you to put on the chart itself. And I'm just going to double check on the movie where that one comes from, just to be really nerdy about it. But that was kind of fun, working on the chairs and, yeah, working on this stuff, which is all pretty good fun. So then I started working around to the intakes, the vents on the front, because I knew what they'd supplied wasn't exactly right. I wanted to make sure that there were no join lines inside there. Even though it's dark, they give you a piece to stick on, which is not going to be have a smooth connection. So in scratch building, what I have to put in there, I wanted to make sure it was clear of the interior control cabin bucket that kind of sits inside. So looking at that, the bars, those 3 bars over each vent, are actually quite accurate in terms of the detail, but they do sort of contour in a little bit. They're kind of like straight, but they kind of bend into the hull. In hindsight, I probably shouldn't have cut these off because they're actually pretty good. I did need to get rid of them anyway, as I say, just to be able to get in there and make sure there's no gaps or joins as it sort of recesses into the hull of the ship. In looking at the ear scene, in looking at that, I saw my attention was called to the rear of the ship. This is probably the biggest inaccuracy or biggest invention by Mobius in making this kit. I talked a lot about the upper surface, a bit at the rear, the kind of box, for want of a better word, that sticks out on the bottom at the rear. If you look at these side views, you can clearly see the bottom of the hull is one sweeping shape, and this protrudes from that. It sort of intersects. In the Mobius kit, it overlaps. So if you look at it in profile, you can see the sort of leading edge of it sort of protrudes into it, which is just wrong. And it is hard to see. There's lots of these. It's a funny shape. This is a complex looking ship, and you do get some pretty decent looks. And as I say, that profile, clearly you can tell that this is intersects only in that sort of bottom plane, if you like. If you look at the blueprints, which are online, they're not terribly accurate. There are some differences there from how it actually came on. But it's, if researching this thing, I look at it from find stills of the mock-up from the movie, because that's what you've really got. And then if you can find stills of the mock-up behind the scenes, that can give you additional information. Although in situations like some of the publicity shots in the lab, where there's that couch in there, that doesn't really fit. And there's even some shots in the movie where they kind of shoot from sort of the front back towards the crew, and there's a lot of just bits of scenery, one-off scenery they put in there just to kind of get the shot. But anyway, by and large, I look at shots from the movie of the full-size mock-up. If I can't see what I need to see there, because it's just ambiguous, or like this back section, you just really don't see it, I see if there's any shots of the miniature. And you do see, most shots of the model you see clearly are in the brain set, so you do get a look at it there. You take that with a grain of salt, because they don't match up exactly, the miniature and the 5-foot miniature and the full-size prop. And then look at the blueprints. So looking at this thing, like I said, it's pretty clear from this ear shot, what the shot in the ear scene, what's going on with it, and it's pretty clear in that profile shot. It's pretty off. The angle of the sides is actually too steep. It needs to be more shallow than that. The angle on the back is too shallow, and that needs to be more steep. So I have hacked it off. I basically cut it off. I wanted to preserve as much as I could, but yeah, there's not much there really, and it's a pretty simple shape. It's a scratch build, fortunately. So that's what I've done. I've taken it off. I built I put in some 1/4-inch balsa wood down the middle, in line with that sort of like hill fairing on the front, in line with that to make sure it's all straight. And then I built some bulkheads. Did a lot of screenshots. Again, you see this quite well just before the miniaturizer comes in. You see it there. And yeah, I literally got my son's protractor, and I was measuring angles and taking stills of the model and superimposing that over stills of the from the movie. And it's not 100% accurate, but it's good enough. You can kind of get it in there, and seeing the two together, you can see where angles need to be adjusted. And yeah, and constantly while I'm making these new pieces, I'm holding them up against printouts of the film to make sure they're the right size. So once I'd taken away the box bit, there were gaps in the hull because the Mobius part was wider. Even though the sides were steeper, the whole thing was wider. So once I took that out and put my sides in, I had to sort of recreate the curved hull that leads into it. So I did that with, I put some balsa wood in there just to kind of get the basic blocks in there, knowing that I was going to cover it up with milliput, which is a 2-part thing you mix together. And if you mix it right, which can be a little bit tricky, even though it's just a 2-part thing, it dries really hard and can be sanded like plastic. So anyway, so I did that in several iterations, and sort of sculpted that in there, and then sanded it, and then sculpted a bit more and sanded it, and sort of built the whole thing up to what you see now. So a bit of a laborious process, but the end result is worth it. It looks good and it looks right. So yeah, I should probably add this as an addendum to part 1, although there's many reviews of the kits out there. I haven't really come across any that talk about the accuracy or inaccuracy of this, and I think in part 1 I talked about the fact that it was kind of disappointing, but there's every day there's less and less of the original plastic on this thing to make it correct. And I'm not slavish about this stuff. I'm not very well. I'm dedicated and I want it to be right. But there's some pretty glaring inaccuracies here, and I just don't know really what the guys at Mobius were thinking when they let this out. So in correcting this piece on the bottom, it is narrower than what was on the original kit. Now, I don't know if they made it the width it is to accommodate the lab piece of the kit, the sort of deck piece, or what. But certainly when this is corrected, that doesn't actually fit in anymore. So I had to go in and I basically cut the sides off that and kind of hacked around it a little bit and just sort of trimmed it so it would actually sit flush, as it did originally. The wall areas and some of the other details are going to have to get cut down as well. No, I'm not lighting this kit and I'm not having a removable access, so I'm not really sure what you'll see back in there. But I think you can see here, I can just sort of bring the back wall forward a little bit where the laser rests, and then I'll just cut down some of the other pieces just so everything's kind of in there, and those sort of changes will be not apparent due to the one angle you'll be able to see it from if you look in and shine a light in there. But yeah, it's another example of kind of how this is, where this is a little bit awry. Happy modeling. If you have any questions, thoughts, comments, please post them below. And yeah, see you soon. Bye-bye.